Bring a magnet close to a handful of black sand, and the sand gets pulled toward it. It sounds impossible, but hidden inside that black sand is one of the most extraordinary materials humanity has ever extracted. It exists inside airplanes flying at 40,000 feet, inside the jaws of millions of people as dental implants, and even on your skin every day through sunscreen. That material is titanium, the ninth most abundant element in Earth's crust. Yet it took humans more than 100 years to finally control it. Today, join Mido Explained as we uncover the strange journey that transformed lifeless black sand into one of the most important metals in the modern world. Before 1791, titanium did not exist in any scientific book. The man who changed that was not a famous scientist. It was a village priest named William Gregor, who spent his free time collecting rocks near streams in Cornwall. One day, he held a magnet near a pile of black sand and noticed something strange. The sand was attracted to it. After analyzing it, he discovered traces of a completely unknown metal. He named it, published a report, and then quietly returned to his church duties. And the world, as usual, kept moving on. 4 years later, chemist Martin Heinrich Klaproth discovered the same element in Hungary and named it titanium after the Titans of Greek mythology. By 1797, he realized Gregor had discovered it first. But the name titanium stayed forever. Ironically, neither man lived long enough to see titanium truly isolated, because titanium refused to cooperate. Every time it was heated, it reacted with the air, becoming brittle and useless. It was not until 1910 that Matthew A. Hunter finally produced titanium that was 99.9% pure inside a completely sealed chamber isolated from air. But the process was far too expensive to scale up. The problem still remained. The man who finally solved that problem was not American and not British. He was a Luxembourgish metallurgist named William Kroll, working inside a small laboratory in his own home. In 1930, Kroll began experimenting with a completely different approach. Instead of trying to separate titanium in open air, he moved the entire reaction into a vacuum chamber and used magnesium to pull titanium away from its chlorine compound. For the first time, titanium could remain in a pure form long enough for humans to actually control it. By 1938, after nearly a decade of trial and error, he successfully produced 50 pounds of titanium, personally rolling it into wires, sheets, and bars. For the first time in history, titanium was no longer just something trapped inside test tubes. It could be held, bent, and shaped like a real metal. Then World War II began. Kroll fled Europe and brought his technique with him to the United States. The U.S. government saw its potential and invested heavily in the process. By 1947, 2 tons of titanium sponge were being produced on an industrial scale for the first time. Just 6 years later, that number had jumped to more than 900 tons per year. The metal that had frustrated the scientific world for more than 150 years had finally been conquered. And the remarkable part is that the Kroll process, invented back in the 1930s, is still being used today. So how is titanium actually made? The journey begins not inside a factory, but deep within the earth. Titanium never appears in pure metallic form in nature. Instead, it hides inside 2 main minerals, ilmenite and rutile, which look no different from ordinary rocks and sand. These mineral deposits stretch across Australia, South Africa, Canada, and Mozambique, where heavy machinery digs up millions of tons of ore every year. And here's what makes titanium completely different from most other metals. You cannot smelt it with carbon, the way humans have smelted iron for thousands of years. If you try, titanium immediately reacts with carbon and forms titanium carbide, an extremely hard material that almost nobody wants to create. Titanium, quite literally, refuses to follow the normal path. So instead, the ore is mixed with chlorine and carbon, then heated to around 1000 degrees Celsius to produce titanium tetrachloride, a clear liquid that is extremely dangerous and begins smoking the moment it touches moist air. This is the first form in which titanium can actually be separated from rock, but it still is not metal yet. The next stage is where the Kroll process finally comes into play. Titanium tetrachloride is placed inside a vacuum chamber and reacted with magnesium at high temperatures. The result is a strange porous mass called titanium sponge, which looks more like dirty gray foam than metal. But this is pure titanium in its rawest form. The titanium sponge is then melted inside massive vacuum furnaces, cast into multi-ton ingots, and rolled, forged, or pressed into sheets, bars, and tubes, depending on its final use. The entire process can take weeks, and even a tiny amount of oxygen leaking in can ruin an entire batch of titanium. After all of those complicated processes, what exactly makes titanium worth it? First, it is incredibly strong, yet strangely light. Titanium is nearly as strong as steel, but up to 45% lighter. In aerospace, that difference is critical. Older Boeing 747 aircraft used only about 4% titanium in their airframes. By the time the Boeing 787 Dreamliner arrived, that number had jumped to 15%. Not just because technology improved, but because the aerospace industry increasingly realized that every kilogram removed from an aircraft can save millions of liters of fuel every year. Second, titanium almost never corrodes. The moment it comes into contact with air, it forms a thin protective oxide layer on its surface. If that layer gets scratched, it instantly rebuilds itself. That is why military submarines and seawater filtration systems rely on titanium. Because in saltwater environments, most other metals survive only a few years before rust destroys them. Third, and perhaps strangest of all, the human body does not recognize titanium as a foreign object. It does not trigger immune reactions, it is non-toxic, and it is rarely rejected by the body. In 1965, Swedish doctor Per-Ingvar Brånemark performed the world's first successful titanium dental implant on a human patient. Today, millions of people are carrying titanium inside their bodies without even realizing it. And finally, titanium can survive temperatures that would have melted most other metals long ago, with a melting point of up to 1,668 degrees Celsius. The clearest example was the SR-71 Blackbird, the fastest reconnaissance aircraft ever built, with 93% of its airframe made from titanium. At Mach 3 speeds, the outer skin of the aircraft became so hot that it expanded by nearly 13 centimeters. At those speeds, titanium was no longer just the best option. It was almost the only option. But here's something most people never realize. More than 90% of all titanium mined around the world never becomes metal. Instead, it is transformed into titanium dioxide, a fine white powder that enters everyday life in ways most people would never expect. Titanium dioxide is the most widely used white pigment in the world. It is what gives wall paint its bright white color, what makes toothpaste look clean, and what allows sunscreen to block harmful UV rays. It appears in pill coatings, printing paper, and polyester fabric. Even some processed foods once used it under the additive code E171. If you look around the room you are sitting in right now, the white wall, the white sheet of paper, the white shirt, Many of those things likely contain titanium without you ever realizing it. In other words, the form of titanium you interact with the most every day is probably not inside an airplane or an operating room. It's when you brush your teeth in the morning. So if titanium is that good, why isn't it everywhere already? The simple answer: it's too expensive. In 2024, the global titanium market reached nearly 670,000 tons, worth around $9.5 billion. But compared to steel, titanium is still far more expensive to produce because the Kroll process requires huge amounts of energy, time, and even today, many stages still need to be manually supervised by humans. That is why titanium is still mostly used in industries willing to pay a premium for extreme performance, such as aerospace, military, and medical applications. For everyday cars or ordinary construction, it still remains a distant dream. But that may slowly be changing. Researchers are now experimenting with the FFC Cambridge process, which uses electrolysis to extract titanium directly from oxide without the complex intermediate stages required by the Kroll process. If it succeeds at industrial scale, titanium could become a truly mass-market material for the first time. At the same time, titanium 3D printing is helping companies like Boeing and Lockheed Martin create highly complex aircraft components that previously could not be forged or rolled using traditional manufacturing methods, while also reducing material waste to nearly zero. If these technologies fully mature, titanium could soon appear in lighter cars, stronger bridges, and future spacecraft designed to travel farther than anything humanity has ever built before. The story of titanium is a story of patience. 119 years passed between the moment a village priest picked up a handful of black sand in Cornwall and the moment Matthew Hunter first separated titanium in pure form. Then it took nearly 4 more decades before William Kroll transformed it into something the world could actually use. No other metal in history may have forced humanity to wait that long, and perhaps no other metal was more worth the wait. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to like, subscribe, and stay tuned for more surprising stories behind the most familiar things in everyday life.